with a lot of people's attention being drawn towards the whole mess that was the 2020 election, I feel like a lot of people have forgotten a couple of core things that are really important going on right now. Namely, how lots of people are still suffering through through the lack of a stimulus bill and lack of Republican action on pushing through more aid to people who really need it right now, and the fact that we've only had in this whole 8 months 9 months, 10 months. I'm not sure how long it's been. It's been forever, basically, an entire eternity right now of pandemic that we've only had $1,200 go to people, and maybe for some people a $600 unemployment benefit that went away, and it's now a $300 unemployment benefit that may be matched $100 by the state that isn't getting any money, and budgets from head to toe across this nation is being collapsed. People forget one important thing is that Congress is back in session. Lots of people are talking about what Trump's been doing. Lots of people are talking about the Republicans and the Democrats are saying, but not too many people are focusing on what they're doing, because Congress is back in session. I think it went back in session, I believe, the 9th. And yeah, you're right. We have returned to normalcy, which is absolutely nothing being done for the working class in this country. Take a dive with me, because when I was looking into this, I thought that Congress was doing literally nothing, and I have been completely blown out of the water. I lost this debate because Dianne Feinstein proved me completely wrong. They were doing something. Just in, the Senate passed 2 resolutions that Kamala Harris and I introduced, congratulating the Lakers and the Dodgers on bringing championships back to Los Angeles. Under unprecedented circumstances, these teams went all the way. Congratulations. Why is our Senate run like a high school budget where we forget the arts program, and we forget the math program or the computer science program, or the extracurricular, and we put everything towards sports? What's happening? Why is people are starving? People are getting evicted from their homes, and Dianne Feinstein is like, oh, well, guys, we congratulated the Dodgers and the Lakers for bringing the championships back to LA. The 2 California senators are amazing. California representatives are doing such great work up in the great halls of Congress right now, really bringing it in for the people of this amazing country. They're really making it happen right now. I couldn't wish for any better representation for a state than Dianne Feinstein and Kamala Harris. Wow, now that's amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for all your hard work. But in all seriousness, this is really bad. We talked to a guy the other day about how how more likely than not he's being evicted from his home, and that is just one of tens of millions of Americans who are going to be suffering under the boot of their landlords and under the oppressive force that are large banks hounding them for their payment from not being able to pay through no fault of their own, but complete lack of the government to take care of the people in which they're supposed to derive power from. And with all of this going on, lots of people are sucked into the election, right? And so we'll do the same, and we'll follow them for a moment and get sucked back into the election, because I promise you, we're going to pop out of this wormhole on the other side to talk about people again. After the election, one thing became extremely clear. The polls were reasonably far off, maybe even as far off as they were in 2016, maybe even a little bit less for some states in particular, but off. Okay. And the Democrats expected to pick up seats in the House. They ultimately lost them. Around 8 seats is what they believe that they lost right now, which is not good. My bad. They lost a couple of seats, and now at the end of the day, they're going to have little more than 8 seats over the Republicans coming into the Congress of 2022, right? And they're angry. They're mad. And when establishment Democrats are angry and mad, they have to play their one and only card, which is deflecting blame to someone else. It's never the establishment Democrats' fault. Oh, no. It has to be someone's fault. And this time, it's obvious the everyone's favorite scapegoat, the progressives, and to an extension, organizers. But we'll get into that. Let's read this article with me. It's called "Why the Networks Can't Bear to Call the Election," and it goes on to a little bit of a little bit that's going to be really interesting, is what I think. Yesterday, House Democrat leaders made it clear on a private conference call what messages they don't want the party running on. Lefty stuff like Medicare for all, defunding the police, or anything else that can be tarred as socialist. The prominence of those issues, people like James Clyburn argued, contributed to Democrats losing seats in the House and would cost them the special elections in the Senate. Now, defund the police is one thing. It's easily twisted to mean police abolition, which is different. But neither Ossoff nor Warnock are fire-breathing radicals, so that shouldn't be a problem for centrist voters of the world, whoever they may be. But that raises the question: if the progressive agenda is too much to run on, why should Georgia voters care about who controls the Senate? What is Biden's agenda that the Republicans would block, and what the Democrats would enact if given the chance? This is not a radical question. What is it? My take on Alika Lacey's. Wait, we can skip over that. Sorry. Meanwhile, the Justice Democrats and the Sunrise Movement commissioned an analysis of Democrats in swing districts who won and lost races. And it's found that, in fact, supporters of Medicare for All did just as fine relative to centrists. In fact, Democratic votes declined for candidates the further right they moved. They shared this graphic. This is a really interesting graphic, and it goes along with another graphic that we saw earlier this week, which basically showed that Democrats who ran, and even in swing districts, because the retort to this is basically, we say, all the Democrats that ran on Medicare for All won their seats, right? And then the obvious recant to that, the obvious one would be, well, those Democrats run in more safe districts, right? Well, that's not necessarily true. Look at this. So we can, even in swing districts, some of these places were able to, take back. My bad. Some of these places were even able to take back even more conservative districts while running on quite progressive policies. We see like Porter Porter who's in a district, or mind you, the redder the dot, the more red of a district that they represent. So Katie Porter, who's in a district of +5 or +6 right now, or that may be +3 or +4 for the Republicans. Okay, so this is a very Republican district, won by a margin of almost 7 points. Okay, and she ran more liberal. We talk about Underwood as well, as in Illinois, who runs in a district that runs +5 or 6, who's a more liberal as well. Rounda in California runs in a Republican district, just lost. Underwood lost there. We can talk about Levin. This is a swing district right here. Levin, who runs in a district +1 or 2 for Republicans, won by a handle margin. Malowinski in New Jersey runs in a pretty red district, reasonably on the left side of the spectrum, won by a pretty handle margin. Okay, let's look over here. And Torres, who's more on the conservative side, Torres Small. Now, Torres Small is one of those politicians that I actually, when I saw, I was pretty sad that she lost her election. And the big reason was because Torres is the only a Native American representative in the House in the history of the United States. But she was very against Medicare for All, and she was in a conservative district, and she was more conservative, and she lost her election pretty handily as well, by almost 6 points. Brynlinsky in New York, pretty conservative, lost pretty bad. So, wait, what's happening? Dem sock, lame sock, dems are base. Okay, well, this is something. Just go full communist. Okay. Whoa, he's calling me a beta. How dare you? This is so mean. We're all betas in here? No, that's just you. You're a bottom. You're a bottom beta. That's all I know. Okay, they're talking about JoJo in chat. This means that we're leaving. We're leaving. We're not talking about this anymore. Okay. What can we gain from analysis like this? Well, one thing is that we can understand that more left-wing policy isn't as toxic and detrimental to a lot of people, to a lot of regular voters, as lots of people think. Let's think about this for 1 second. The Democratic establishment, the Democratic position on marijuana isn't necessarily just legalization, right? It isn't that, or at least it's not overtly that. It's really not. There's a lot of contention within establishment Democrats when it comes to where we should go in marijuana. Now, what happened this election on the ballot initiatives? I'm talking about things that people were able to vote for. In every single state where marijuana was on the ballot, it was pushed to the left. Every single state. There's not a single state where marijuana was pushed to the right or kept completely illegal in any state. If you have a ballot, if there was a ballot initiative this election cycle, it won. It either became legal for medical purposes or legal for recreational purposes or decriminalized or legalized or any or whatever movement that was asked to voters. Voters took that movement. That's one. Okay, and there was not a single Democrat who ran on Medicare for all who lost their district. Even ones in relatively swing districts with +1 or +1 or even plus up to 5 or 6 representing conservative districts who ran on things like Medicare for all did not lose their election. Now, why? It's because they're giving people something that they want. Instead of spending their time talking about how the Dodgers and the Lakers brought the championships back to their state, how about talking about how you're going to give people in that state who don't know, who can't pay their bills or can't put food on the table or don't know where they're going to lay their head down at night or scared of getting their tent firebombed, on the street or don't know if their rights are going to be protected. How about give those people something to vote for? The big problem on Democrats isn't running too far to the left. The big problem for Democrats this election cycle was running on nothing. If you ask people what Democrats are running on this cycle, they're not going to tell you much because they're not necessarily sure. There are some things that they know, but when it comes to the Democratic positions, it's not really that clear. The entire cycle was dominated not by let's get good policy in, it was dominated by let's get Donald Trump out. And while that can be good for like top of the ticket races, like maybe the general election, besides that, down ballot, it's not very good. You're not giving people anything. You're not running on anything. So why should they vote for you? Why? Because the big bag boogeyman was Donald Trump. And after that, you see like lots of Democrats underperforming Joe Biden in the down ballot tickets. Why was that? It's a complete failure for the Democrats to stand for anything. Let's talk about Florida. Joe Biden lost Florida by 300,000 votes. What happened in Florida? They had their minimum wage increase. A ballot initiative passed. The minimum wage increase candidate lost in a state where they passed a minimum wage increase. What's happening? It's because they don't run on anything. What's happening? I mean, you can't. How many times did Joe Biden talk about let's raise the minimum wage federally? Let's do that. Instead of talking about reclaim the soul of the nation, I'm not gonna run. I'm a proud Democrat, but I'm gonna run as an American president to bring this country together. Listen, okay, that can be cool. That can be cool and everything. But yeah, you're right. His campaign ran terribly because it just coasted on one thing, which is hatred for Donald Trump, and you can't get much done off of that besides maybe winning some top of the ticket elections that went on to hurt Democrats at the end of the day. If you go to these people and you talk about policy that can help them, right? They're going to be far more amicable to you. And it doesn't matter what the right's going to say. Obviously, you don't want to play into their hands too much, right? But when it comes to calling you a socialist or a communist or this or that or taking money from George Soros, getting the Soros bucks, when it comes to all that, it's par for the course. That's territory. They're calling Joe Biden and Kamala Harris communists. You think that was going to change if they ran further to the right? They could have been running to the right of them. And they'll still probably label them as communists just because they have a D next to their name. I mean, come on now. This is ridiculous. Joseph R. Biden and Kamala Harris. Communists. Heck off, commie. I mean, that's what I'd say if there were any here, but there are absolutely none. It's ridiculous. These attacks are going to happen. They're horrible at running elections. They're horrible at counterattacks. There are some Democrats that are good at counterattacks, but they just fall prey to Republican framing. They're way too bought into the idea of civility and decorum and and hand wringing. They spent their entire time hand wringing about organizers and going too far left, when at the end of the day the people who are far left handed this election to Democrats. They did, or at least Joe Biden. They handed it to them on a silver platter. They did. You can't imagine the heavy lifting, like people that people like organizers in Philadelphia whose mail-in ballots went 80% for Joe Biden. 80%, mind you. The mail-in ballots in Pennsylvania, Biden took 1 million, Trump took 200,000. It's an incredible amount of turnout that happened in Philadelphia, and all because of leftist organizers and black and brown organizers across this country who run on things like Medicare for all, who run on things like a Green New Deal, who run on things like an infrastructure change, who run on things like higher wages, who run on things like legalized marijuana. They run on these sorts of things, right? And they got people out to vote for you so you can actually do it. There's one thing to get Trump out. It's another thing to actually do something with the power that they've given you. Because Biden has talked about this before. The Democratic establishment talks about this before, but they fail always to realize on the idea that power doesn't come from this magical realm. You don't sit in the Oval Office and you're feeding off of power from the infinite void of nothingness. That doesn't happen. It comes from the people. They put you there. It's our White House. That's our Oval Office. It's our power. It's our House. It's our Congress. That's what it is. It's not theirs. It's ours. This is supposed to be at least a vaguely democratic society, and we fail to realize any of the ideas that are said to be enshrined in our Constitution. Real democracy, real protections from the state, the pursuit of happiness. It just failed on all fronts. The entire history of this country failure, complete failure. It's the shining city on a hill is kind of a mirage, and it's unfortunate. We can read a little bit of what some Democrats had to say about what is it? About some organizers. One second. We can talk about Connor Lamb and what's her name? Abigail Spanberger. So Abigail Spanberger and Connor Lamb were two people who narrowly won their elections in conservative districts, who decided to take their anger from having to actually fight to having to actually run on something. Mind you, they're mad that they actually had to go out and hold an actual election, actually talk to their constituents. This is what they're mad about. They decided to take all that anger and point it towards the left. Spanberger won a narrow victory and spent 2019 and 2020 further distancing herself from the party's progressive wing. She once again locked in a close count, but it appears to again have the upper hand, poised for re-election. Sorry, wait 1 second. Jeez, sorry, I'm a little snotty. When the seasons change, I get a little snotty. Sorry. It's not diminished her rage for the left. On the call Thursday, Spanberger vented on the abolish ICE, but at not at abolish ICE, but defund the police. The slogan that gained mainstream currency following the protests sparked by the killing of George Floyd and the Minneapolis police. Representative Connor Lamb, whose special election victory in 2018 was a bellwether for the coming blue wave, backed Spanberger up. Spanberger was talking about something many of us are feeling today. We pay the price for these unprofessional and unrealistic comments about a number of issues, whether it's about the police or shale gas. Lamb said, "These issues are too serious for the people we represent to tolerate them being talked about so casually." Casually? What? Your layman, your average American can't chime in, can't put their 2 cents in on political issues that directly affect their lives and sometimes even end their lives. Lamb was one who was in a heated argument with AOC recently about where the path that the country should take, and the path the Democratic Party in general should take after the election, and hand wringing about how terrible it was for these organizers and these progressive politicians to be talking about crazy things like Medicare for all and saving us from a climate disaster. But at the end of the day, like I said, it was these organizers that handed the election to people like Connor Lamb. We can look at this for 1 second. One more note, in May and June, when Dem voter registration had bottomed out due to the pandemic and GOP were out registering Dems, it was the George Floyd BLM demonstrators that created a huge surge and registration spike. So you see this massive spike of registration that topped everything from independents and Republicans, maybe even combined. This incredible spike in registration that may have even handed the election to Democrats this time around and stopped them from bleeding more votes. It was handed to them by organizers. I remember specifically reading something in Philadelphia. There was a pastor who was having a bike rally, it was like an act, like a motor, like he was on his Harley, he was having like a biking voter registration rally in Pennsylvania to try and get black and brown people out to vote in Philadelphia, because lots of them stayed home in 2016. He was like, this is the state that the entire election hinges on. We can do this. We can hand it to the Democrats so we can actually have something done for once in our lives, so they can actually do something, right? That's what they want. They want them to do something. And Georgia going blue for the first time in like 40 years. An old slave state going blue for the first time because of Atlanta and the organizers there pushing for change, dreaming of a better world. That's what they did. That's what they wanted. And this is what the Democrats do. They spit in their face. They tell them, how dare you talk about this so casually? How dare you talk about big issues so casually, like you deserve to talk about them, huh? Really? How dare you? How dare you chime in? Shut up and sit down, as they tried to hand an election to them. Disgusting. And this is why they lose their elections. They don't do anything. They run as Republicans and they lose to the Republicans. It's really interesting what they believe. It's really unfortunate what they believe. But I did not expect this. This is something that should be expected from especially the more right-wing parts of the party. These things that they do, because they don't see it. They still haven't learned anything from 2016. They're still pushing things like, oh, we're so glad that the Republicans helped us pass a resolution giving thanks to the Dodgers and the Lakers, while still 26 million Americans slipped into poverty. Millions of Americans can't put food on the table. Millions of Americans can't get their medicine, so live with debilitating diseases. Millions of Americans are getting evicted or could get evicted soon. That's what they're doing right now. Doing things like this, hand-wringing about the people who handed them elections, hand-wringing about the people who get out their political opponents, and they sit on their ass and do absolutely nothing for them. That's what it's like. That's what that's like. That's why we need a change in this country, because of people like that, people like Lamb, people like Spainberger. It's gone now. The idea that progressive policies are losing policies are gone now. It's vanished. All right, you bring that to me, it's done. All right, it's ridiculous. It doesn't happen. You run on something. Progressive policies win down ballot, but the Democrats don't. Why? Complete messaging failure. They're failures and they're losers, and they don't deserve to be in office. The only reason they're there is because they're marginally better than Republicans on select issues, and that's just what it is.